So I've been sitting with this idea for a while, and it's been bothering me more the longer I think about it, because every time Stranger Things Season 5 comes up, everyone immediately goes into boss fight mode, like this is a video game and Vecna is just waiting in the final room with a bigger health bar. And I keep thinking that if that's really what this story ends up being about, then the show has been lying to us for almost a decade. Not in a clever way, but in a sloppy, cowardly way. And I don't think the Duffers are that careless, even when they're being indulgent. I'm convinced Season 5 isn't about Vecna at all, not in the way people think. And the more you trace the story backward instead of forward, the clearer it gets that Vecna is less a villain and more an invoice that Hawkins has been refusing to open since 1983. Because here's the thing nobody likes to say out loud. Vecna doesn't represent chaos or evil or darkness from another world. He represents accountability, showing up late and pissed off. You can go all the way back to Season 1 and see the pattern forming in real time, where something horrible happens, a handful of people survive it, the town pretends it didn't happen, the government cleans it up with lies and paperwork, and then everyone moves on emotionally without actually dealing with anything. The Upside Down itself is the biggest clue that this was never meant to be just another spooky dimension, because if it were, it wouldn't be so obsessed with Hawkins. It wouldn't copy the town down to the street layout, the houses, the school hallways, the furniture placement, and it definitely wouldn't freeze itself on the exact day a kid vanished and the town collectively decided to lie about it. Worlds don't do that accidentally. Stories do that on purpose. The Upside Down isn't exploring Hawkins, it's stuck in it. And that detail alone should have ended the whole parallel universe debate years ago, because parallel worlds don't stop updating unless something went wrong at a very specific moment. That moment, obviously, is Will Byers disappearing. And I don't mean in the literal plot sense where a monster grabs him and drags him somewhere else. I mean in the emotional sense where Hawkins loses its innocence and then immediately refuses to admit that anything fundamental changed. From that night on, the town keeps functioning, keeps smiling, keeps hosting fairs and pep rallies and town meetings, but the emotional clock never moves forward, and the Upside Down becomes the physical representation of that freeze. It's Hawkins the way it exists in memory, not the way it exists in reality. And memory is a dangerous thing when you keep trying to bury it instead of dealing with it. This is why Vecna works the way he does, and it's honestly wild how many people miss this, even after Season 4 spells it out as clearly as possible, without having a character stare into the camera and explain it. Vecna doesn't hunt strong people. He doesn't go after heroes mid-battle. He targets people whose pain was ignored, minimized, or brushed aside by the people around them, because unresolved pain is the most efficient entry point into a person's mind. Vecna isn't creating suffering, he's harvesting it after the fact. And this is where Hawkins itself starts to look real ugly when you zoom out, because for all its small-town charm and nostalgia aesthetic, this place has a nasty habit of protecting systems instead of people. Hawkins' lab ruins lives and vanishes without a real reckoning. The government steps in, erases evidence, and calls it closure. Adults tell kids they're imagining things until the problem becomes impossible to ignore. And even then, the goal is containment, not truth. Nobody ever stands in front of the town and says, "We caused this and we're sorry." And that silence is exactly what gives the Upside Down room to grow. Season after season, the story keeps reinforcing this idea that survival without reflection is just a delay, not a victory. The kids win battles, but the war keeps mutating, not because the enemy is clever, but because the root problem is never addressed. Every open gate is treated like an isolated incident instead of a symptom, and by the time Vecna shows up, he isn't escalating the conflict so much as consolidating it. He's what happens when all the ignored trauma finally organizes itself into a voice that refuses to be quiet anymore. What makes this even more uncomfortable is that Vecna isn't entirely wrong in how he sees the world. That's the part people don't like to sit with. He's cruel, he's manipulative, he's violent, but his core belief that Hawkins is rotten underneath the surface isn't exactly disproven by the story. The town creates him by refusing to look inward, then acts shocked when the consequences look back. He's not invading Hawkins, he's emerging from it. And that distinction matters a lot going into a final season that's supposed to wrap everything up. The frozen timeline detail in The Upside Down is probably the most important storytelling choice the show has made since season 1, and it's insane that it still gets dismissed as a plot hole instead of treated like the giant neon sign it is. Time doesn't just stop unless the story wants you to ask why. The fact that the Upside Down is locked on the day Will vanished suggests that whatever this place is, it's anchored to an emotional rupture, not a scientific experiment gone wrong. The lab opened the door, sure, but the town's response is what sealed the damage in place. This also reframes Will's role in the story in a way that Season 5 basically has no choice but to address, because you can't end a show like this by sidelining the character who embodies its original wound. Will isn't just sensitive or psychic or conveniently connected to the Upside Down. He's the living reminder of the moment Hawkins decided to pretend everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. His ongoing connection isn't random, and it's not just a leftover plot device. It's the story refusing to let the audience forget where this all started. When people say Season 5 is about stopping Vecna, what they're really saying is that they want a clean ending. And I get that impulse, because clean endings feel good, and they make it easier to move on. The problem is that clean endings don't match the emotional logic the show has been building for years. You can't resolve a story about suppressed trauma by punching it hard enough. You can't close a wound you never admitted was there. If Season 5 ends with Vecna dead and Hawkins going back to normal, it would feel like the show learned absolutely nothing from itself. What Season 5 is actually positioned to explore is whether healing is even possible after that much denial, and that's a way scarier question than whether the gang can win another fight. Vecna's power isn't strength or intelligence or magic, it's memory, and memory is undefeated if you keep trying to erase it instead of facing it. This is why the idea of the Upside Down as a temporal echo rather than a separate universe makes so much sense thematically, because it turns the final conflict into something internal instead of external. If the Upside Down is a manifestation of a moment that never got resolved, then the only way to end it isn't destruction, it's confrontation. That doesn't mean therapy sessions and hugs and everything magically being okay, but it does mean characters being forced to acknowledge what they lost, what they ignored, and what they became because of it. People keep asking how Stranger Things should end, and I think the real question is what kind of lie the show is willing to tell at the finish line. A triumphant ending where evil is defeated and everyone rides off into the sunset would be comforting, but it would also be dishonest to everything the story has shown us about growth, pain, and consequences. A more complicated ending, one where things improve without fully resetting, one where scars remain visible, would actually feel earned. Vecna doesn't need to be the final boss to matter. In fact, he matters more as a mirror than as a monster. He's the physical form of everything Hawkins refused to process, and killing him without addressing that truth would just mean the cycle starts again under a different name. Season 5 has the chance to break that loop, not by escalating the spectacle, but by forcing the characters in the town to finally tell the truth they've been running from since a kid disappeared on a quiet night in November. If that's not what Season 5 is about, then I honestly don't know why this show kept digging so deep into memory, trauma, and denial for 4 seasons straight. Vecna's scary, sure, but the idea that a place can rot from the inside when it refuses to own its mistakes is a lot scarier, and it's also a lot closer to real life than most people are comfortable admitting. That's why this ending matters, and that's why I don't think it's about Vecna at all.